One expedition was so catastrophic, it destroyed an entire country's economy and forced two nations to merge. These are the most daring expeditions that leave behind a trail of ambition, betrayal, and fatal mistakes. Starting us off with number 10, the Terra Nova expedition. By the early 20th century, nearly every corner of the globe had been claimed, but the South Pole remained one of the last great prizes. The Terra Nova expedition, led by Robert Scott, the man who had ventured further south than anyone else, set out with 4 companions on what he thought would be the grandest adventure of his life: to be the first to reach the South Pole. The ship departed Littleton, New Zealand, loaded with motor sledges, ponies, dogs, and photographic equipment to record their triumph. By January 4th, 1911, they camped just 15 miles north of Hut Point on Antarctica. It didn't take long for the first warning. One of the sledges was lost to sea ice in just 4 days, but the men took it in stride, staying put for most of the year, a decision that should have raised red flags. Clothing froze, supplies dwindled, and yet on October 24th, they finally set out for the South Pole with no better plans and no warmer gear. By early November, both sledges were abandoned. By December 9th, the ponies were dead, shot out of mercy. Against all odds, Scott made it to the South Pole on January 17th, 1912, only to discover that someone had beaten him to it. But things were about to get worse. And if you want more journeys to the edge of the map, hit that subscribe button. I'm still trying to survive the deadliest frontier of all, YouTube's algorithm. The return journey was a nightmare. Exhaustion, scurvy, and frostbite claimed the men one by one. One fell into a crevice and died 13 days later. Another, crippled by frostbite, walked into a blizzard to spare the others. By March 21st, Scott and the last 2 survivors were trapped in another storm, leaving farewell letters as the world waited in vain. Their bodies weren't found until November. Meanwhile, Roald Amundsen, the man who had beaten them to the pole and returned safely, had traveled light, dressed in furs, and relied on dogs. He treated the expedition like a mission, not an adventure. But at least the Terra Nova team knew they could only rely on themselves. When allies fail, the cost can be deadly. Number 9, the Coppermine expedition. The Northwest Passage was a siren song for explorers for 400 years. Until Amundsen, no one had ever made it. So, the rumors swirled. The Arctic seas didn't just offer a faster way to reach Asia. They might hide lost civilizations, Atlantis, El Dorado, maybe even a gateway to a hollow Earth. It was 1819, and nobody knew. Enter John Franklin. The British government sent 22 men under his command to map Canada's Arctic islands and find a sea route clear of ice. It was ambitious, it was well-funded, and it was underprepared. Without the budget to match, local natives and 2 fur trading companies were supposed to help, but rivalry and miscommunication left aid thin. By August, they set out over 1,700 miles to the Great Slave Lake. The 1820-21 winter with the Yellowknife natives was brutal. When June arrived, the team pushed on along the Coppermine River, reaching the sea for the first time in 2 years. But the Yellowknife guides left, abandoning them at the moment of triumph. Canadian summers are short. The expedition set out in canoes and only managed to scout 500 miles of coastline before the seas became too rough to row back. That meant crossing the barren lands to the lake. Supplies ran low. The cold chilled them to the bone. The men were starving, surviving on whatever they could find, usually decayed carcasses and bone soup. Franklin and his advance group made it back to their shelter on October 12th, only to find it deserted. The Yellowknives had left it a while back, without any food. The orders apparently weren't clear enough. The stragglers seemingly had it better. One of the members presented wolf meat. It was a miraculous find, except it wasn't wolf meat at all. But it did give 2 people enough strength to make it back. Barely. The group survived on lichen fungi and their own boots until the Yellowknives finally came back with supplies on November 7th. Only 8 of the 19 survived the ordeal, and they brought back no news of the Northwest Passage. Franklin's story doesn't end there. More on him later though. This next story proves that experience doesn't mean much when you're up against nature. Number 8. Percy Fawcett and the Lost City of Z. He'd followed obscure treasure maps through Sri Lanka, survived the deserts of Morocco, and carved paths through uncharted Amazon jungle, facing snakes, piranhas, and slave catchers to settle a border dispute between Bolivia and Brazil. Experts said it would take 2 years. Fawcett did it in months. The Amazon nearly killed him in 1908, and he barely seemed to care. It was safe to say that Percy Fawcett wasn't some reckless amateur. He was one of the most experienced explorers of his era, a member of the Royal Geographical Society, but he had an obsession. He believed in a lost city, not El Dorado. No, this was real, built by civilizations dismissed as primitive, hidden deep in the Amazon. By 1914, he was convinced it lay along the Xingu River in Brazil's Mato Grosso. War intervened. Fawcett served on the Western Front with distinction, even at 50. When it ended, he returned to his obsession. The first attempt failed. The second would not. In 1924, Fawcett set out with his son Jack, Jack's friend Raleigh, and 2 local guides. No excess gear, just the essentials. They made good ground. "You need have no fear of failure," he wrote to his wife. He continued to write until May 29th. 3 days later, Percy Fawcett was last seen alive at Dead Horse Camp. After that, nothing. No bodies, no letters, no trace. Some believe they were killed by bandits. Some even say they settled down in the Amazon. The likeliest answer is that they came upon hostile tribes. The mystery didn't end with them, though. Search parties followed, dozens of them. At least one man died trying to solve what happened to Percy Fawcett. The dream of City Z continued to take lives long after Fawcett had gone. When you think of trips that descend into disaster and sheer hell, the next expedition does come to mind as well. Number 7. The Donner Party. The snow fell, and then they ate their dead. Families huddled in frozen cabins. A mother carved meat from a man she'd shared a wagon with for 6 months. Children gnawed on bones. Hunger had stripped humanity from them, leaving one unthinkable choice: eat or die. But this disaster had been set in motion months earlier. In 1846, the Donner Party left Missouri bound for California. 87 people, 80 wagons, and full of hope. They had been promised a shortcut south of the Great Salt Lake. Experienced travelers who left early in the season refused to risk it. One of them, journalist Edwin Bryant, scouted part of the route and knew it was a disaster waiting to happen, but his warnings never reached their intended audience. The Donner Party arrived late in the season. Winter was closing in. The shortcut sounded like salvation. It wasn't. Crossing the desert with heavy wagons turned the shortcut into a delay. Weeks were lost. By October, they reached Truckee Lake in modern California. With one last push, they could make it over the mountains. Soon, they were snowed in. The passes closed overnight. Movement stopped. Supplies vanished. By mid-December, the pack animals were gone, and so was the first member of the party. An advance party was sent out to find help. They found it, but not before resorting to eating the dead along the way. Rescuers arrived on February 19th. They were greeted by figures emerging from the snow. The main camp had already turned to cannibalism. 12 were dead. More would follow. Conditions were too dangerous to take everyone out at once. Survivors had to leave in waves. Even getting food in risked lives. When spring came, only 48 of the original 89 remained. The cold had claimed the Donner Party, but a different kind of extreme awaited men bold enough to cross it. Number 6. The Berkey and Willis Expedition. The Outback is vast and merciless, a land no one could tame. The Australian government dangled a prize, £2,000 for whoever dares to cross it, but this was no ordinary challenge. It was a gamble with death itself. In 1860, a man named Robert O'Hara Berkey stepped forward. He had no exploration experience, but plenty of confidence. The team was well equipped. They left Melbourne to the cheers of 15,000 people. One wagon broke immediately. 2 more failed before they made it out of the city. Progress was slow, and a rival expedition from South Australia was racing toward the same goal. So Berkey made a fateful decision: establish a depot at Cooper Creek, split the party, and push on fast. Guns, ammunition, and lime juice were left behind, but they still took the gong. They marched into the outback in the height of the Australian summer. And as is so often in exploration, survival came from the local indigenous people, who provided food and water. Berkey and his reduced party made it to within 3 miles from the Gulf of Carpentaria. The heat didn't break them. The April monsoon rains did. The animals went first, collapsing from exhaustion or slaughtered for food. On April 10th, they shot their last horse. What followed was a deadly game of near misses. The forward party and the depot teams passed within miles of each other, never meeting, never resupplying. Disease and exhaustion finished the job. By June, only 1 man remained: John King. He only survived thanks to the Yandrawanda people saving him, but he never fully recovered and died 11 years later, aged just 33. If the Australian heat had broken men, the Arctic would destroy them. Number 5. Franklin's Lost Expedition. In 1822, Britain wasn't done looking for the Northwest Passage. By 1845, John Franklin was back, older, confident, and this time sent by sea. London spared no expense. He was given 2 ships, the HMS Erebus and the HMS Terror, iron-plated, outfitted with all the supplies anyone would ever need. There were stoves to melt ice and make fresh water, state-of-the-art radiators to keep the crew warm, steam engines for auxiliary power, plus 8,000 tin cans of food. Enough, Franklin believed, to last 5 years. He signed the food contract just a month before departure. The expedition set out from Greenhithe in Kent on May 9, 1845, with 134 people on board. A supply ship accompanied them, taking 5 sick men back in July. They were the lucky ones. July 29th was the last time anyone saw Erebus or Terror. What followed had to be pieced together. The ships likely wintered near King William Island and never escaped. The ice closed in and didn't let go. Years later, skeletons began emerging from the permafrost. By the early 1980s, forensic tests revealed the truth. Despite all those supplies, the crew was starving. They were ravaged by scurvy. Archaeologists found the tins and discovered they were poorly sealed. The food had spoiled. Franklin never inspected them. He did, however, find time to pack fine china and a library of over 1,000 books. By April 1848, the ships were abandoned. Franklin was already dead, probably since June the previous year. The survivors marched south into the ice, growing weaker by the day. We don't have to speculate what happened next. In 1992, more bones surfaced, this time with cut marks. It was clear evidence of cannibalism. 2 more big pieces of the puzzle fell into place in 2014. The HMS Erebus was found in 2014 near Queen Maud Gulf. The Terror came to light 2 years later, just south of King William Island. The wrecks showed crews isolated, trapped, watching each other die with no hope of rescue. By the end of 1848, the last man was dead. Franklin wasn't the first to learn that some shortcuts aren't worth the risk. This next story proves survival isn't about bravery or technology. It's about knowing when not to fight nature. Number 4. Magellan's failure. Only 1 expedition in this list succeeded, and even then, it came with a huge cost. Ferdinand Magellan's goal was simple: find a western route to the Spice Islands, shorter than the route around the Cape of Good Hope. He had 5 ships and 265 men, but cracks appeared immediately. Only 18 would survive. The ships were old, pay was poor, and experienced sailors stayed away. Magellan recruited from across Europe, the Levant, even Africa. Many crews couldn't speak the same language, and command fell to unqualified Spanish nobles hoping to get rich. They sailed from Sevilla on September 20th, 1519, reaching Brazil in 2 months. Then came the real problem. finding a way to the Pacific. Magellan wintered in southern Patagonia from March to August of 1520. Apparently unaware it was summer, hunger and delays broke morale. Mutiny erupted. One ship deserted and another smashed on a reef, taking vital supplies. With 3 ships left, Magellan crossed the strait that would bear his name. Calm seas ended when they reached the Pacific. Supplies ran out. The men ate wormy hardtack, rats, leather, and sawdust. Water was yellow and recycled. Scurvy tore through the crew. They didn't drop anchor until March 6, 1521, in what's now Guam. After resupplying, they reached the Philippines. Magellan didn't leave alive. 40 more men died with him. Another ship's worth of crew gone. 2 ships remained. 1 turned back. 1 ship pressed on, under the command of the Basque navigator Juan Sebastián de Elcano. He made it to the Spice Islands, but then the long way home, around the Cape of Good Hope, hunted by Portuguese ships and starving all the way. 3 years after departure, 18 Europeans and 4 Malays limped back to Spain. The voyage proved the Cape route was still the best option. For all their suffering, at least Magellan's sailors chased something real. Hundreds more suffered because they believed in a total fantasy. Number 3. The Narvaez Expedition. Juan Ponce de Leon went to Florida chasing rumors of the Fountain of Youth. But the only thing magical about this expedition was how quickly it turned deadly. The real target was gold. So, naturally, others wanted to follow in the footsteps of the original Florida man. 5 ships and 600 men set out into 1527 under Pánfilo de Narváez, a veteran of the conquests of Cuba and Mexico. The mission was to claim Florida, and a hurricane off Cuba killed 60 men and 20 horses before they even reached Florida. It wasn't until April 12, 1528 that they landed near modern Tampa Bay. They moved north into the wilderness. Narvaez's second-in-command suggested they stay with the ships, but Narvaez ordered them to sail ahead. 300 men went inland and had nowhere to retreat to under the hail of native arrows. No gold, no fortune, just a lesson not to go chasing rumors. Summer passed as they tried to find the ships. Horses were eaten, supplies ran out. Narvaez ordered the construction of 5 barges, 50 men each, to sail to Mexico during hurricane season. The barges leaked, storms scattered them, and Narvaez vanished forever. Everything was now in the hands of the second-in-command, Cabeza de Vaca, a man with no exploration experience. He and the remaining survivors were blown clear across the Gulf and crashed on Galveston Island in November. And this is where the real odyssey began. They traveled overland to the Gulf of California, enduring more native attacks and starvation. The dwindling teams were then taken as slaves and somehow made the most of it by building reputations as medicine men. After 8 brutal years, in July of 1536, 4 survivors, including Cabeza de Vaca, made it to Mexico City. Number 2. The Darien Scheme. It all began with a banker's dream and turned into a nation's nightmare. William Peterson helped create the Bank of England, but he got tired of making England rich. He had a bolder idea, a Scottish colony on the Isthmus of Panama. Once it was established, they could control the trade routes, corner the market, and strike gold. Or at least that was the plan. The company to finance the idea launched in 1693, promising an international effort. The English East India Company didn't want competitors, so the Scots went it alone, with little exploration experience. Regardless, investors jumped at the chance. Half of Scotland's available capital poured in, a fifth of the country's total wealth. After years of planning, 5 ships and 1,200 excited settlers made landfall on October 30th, 1698, and the nightmare began immediately. First problem. The land, dubbed Caledonia, was perfect for mosquitoes, not for farming. Second, the settlers were unprepared. They had little food and no knowledge of maize or yams. Third, the land was already claimed by Spain. Relentless attacks by the Spanish and hostile natives made it impossible to trade. And then there was the terrain. It was merciless, and 17th century technology couldn't make trade routes work. The whole plan was doomed from the start. 10 settlers died every day. 8 months later, only 300 remained. But it still gets worse. Word traveled slowly. 2 more relief expeditions set out. Only 1 ship returned. Thousands of lives lost. Scotland's economy was shattered. The Scots had no choice now. Only 7 years later, Scotland and England united to become Great Britain. The Spaniards, meanwhile, were chasing gold, and that obsession led directly to the most delusional and deadliest expedition the world had ever seen. Finally, number 1, Pizarro's quest for El Dorado. By 1541, it was clear the New World was very rich. Surely there had to be a land overflowing with gold, hidden deep in South America. So, Gonzalo Pizarro, younger brother of Francisco the Conquistador, set out from Quito in February with 340 Spanish troops and 4,000 native allies. Their route was a 2,000-mile path along the Coca and Napo rivers. But Pizarro hadn't planned for an expedition this long, or this deadly. The jungle was brutal. The elements were harsh. Mosquitoes feasted, disease spread, supplies dwindled, and arrows rained down from angry natives. After 11 months, over 3,000 men were dead. Survivors ate their horses to stay alive. And still no El Dorado. Something wasn't adding up. In desperation, Pizarro sent his second-in-command, Francisco de Orellana, down another river in search of food with a force of 50 men. It was the day after Christmas, 1541. A month went by. Orellana didn't return. Pizarro, now starving and shoeless, limped back to Quito with the few survivors, vowing revenge. He was convinced Orellana had found El Dorado and kept it secret. And Orellana did succeed, just not in the way Pizarro thought. The currents were strong and swept him and his men along, making them the first Europeans to navigate the entire Amazon River. Native women attacked along the way, fierce as the mythic Amazons, and that's how the river got its name. As for El Dorado, its location remains a mystery. Countless expeditions would follow, chasing a dream that never existed. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please consider subscribing and turn on notifications. Really does make a difference. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on MapPack.